I was standing in front of a 7-Eleven at 3 in the morning, counting coins in my palm under the fluorescent lights. $48. That's what remained of $310,000 in savings, a pension I'd earned over 35 years, and a life I'd built brick by brick in Cleveland, Ohio. The cashier, a young Thai kid who couldn't have been more than 20, watched me count out the baht for a sandwich and a bottle of water. He didn't look at me with pity or judgment, just the blank recognition you give to someone who's become part of the landscape. Another broken farang on soy buakau. Another face in the endless parade of men who came to Pattaya looking for something and left with nothing. My reflection in the store window showed a man I barely recognized. 65 years old, 20 pounds lighter than I should be, wearing a sleeveless shirt that had seen better days and sandals held together with duct tape. The Harley-Davidson tattoo on my forearm, a relic from my youth, looked faded and ridiculous now. 3 years earlier, I'd walked these same streets, feeling like a king. Girls knew my name. Bar owners saved my favorite seat. I had money in my pocket and believed I'd finally found the life I deserved after decades of hard work and a marriage that had crushed my spirit. But Pattaya doesn't work the way you think it does. It doesn't rob you at gunpoint or drug your drink or forge your signature. It does something far more effective. It makes you rob yourself, one night at a time, one girl at a time, until you wake up one morning and realize you've got nothing left except the memory of how good it felt to matter to someone. This is my story, not about one scammer or one betrayal, but about how a lonely man from Ohio became addicted to a feeling and how that addiction cost me everything. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. Before Pattaya, I was Harold Peterson Howell to everyone who knew me. I managed a truck fleet for a logistics company in Cleveland for 35 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. I made sure drivers had their routes, trucks got maintained, and shipments arrived on time. I was good at it because I was organized, reliable, and I didn't take garbage from anyone. I married young 23 to a woman named Linda who worked at the company's administrative office. We bought a small house in Parma, a working-class suburb where everyone knew their neighbors and nobody locked their doors. For 15 years, we lived what I thought was a normal life. I worked 60-hour weeks. She kept the house. We talked about having kids but never quite got around to it. Looking back now, I can see we were strangers sharing a mortgage. But at the time, I thought that's just what marriage was. Routine, predictable, safe. I didn't know I was lonely because I'd never known anything different. The divorce came in 2014 when I was 59. Linda had been having an affair with a guy from her book club for 2 years. When she finally told me, she said she'd been unhappy for a decade. I asked why she never said anything. She just looked at me like I was stupid and said, "You were never there to tell." The settlement took half my savings, about $80,000. The house went to her. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near the depot and told myself I was fine. I had 1 more year until retirement. After that, I'd figure out what came next. But the truth was, I had no idea who I was outside of work and a failed marriage. My friends were mostly married couples who'd sided with Linda. My hobbies had died somewhere in my 30s. I'd spent 35 years building a life that evaporated the moment someone decided they didn't want to be part of it anymore. When I finally retired in January 2016 at age 60, I had $310,000 in my retirement account and a pension of $1,800 a month. By Cleveland standards, I was comfortable. I could travel, relax, maybe buy a boat. But I didn't want comfort. I wanted to feel alive again. That's when a guy named Dennis from the depot told me about Thailand. Dennis had been going to Thailand every winter for 5 years. He was 62, divorced, and spent 2 months in a place called Pattaya every year. He showed me pictures on his phone, beaches, temples, smiling Thai women in bikinis, and himself looking younger and happier than I'd ever seen him at work. "Hal, I'm telling you," he said over beers at the American Legion, "it's like stepping into a different life. The weather's perfect, everything's cheap, and the women, they actually want to spend time with you. Not like these American women who think we're all just walking wallets." I'd heard about Thailand before, usually in jokes about old men and Thai brides. I'd always figured it was sad, desperate guys who couldn't get women their own age. But Dennis didn't seem desperate. He seemed happier than anyone I knew. "You should come with me next winter," he said. "Stay 2 weeks. If you hate it, you're only out the plane ticket." I told him I'd think about it, but the truth was, I'd already decided. I booked my flight to Bangkok in November 2016. Round trip, 2 weeks, staying at a hotel Dennis recommended near Walking Street in Pattaya. The ticket cost me $1,200. I told my brother I was going to see temples and beaches. He laughed and said, "Sure you are, Hal." The flight was brutal, 17 hours with connections through Tokyo. But when I stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport, the wall of humid heat that hit me felt like waking up. Everything smelled different. Spices, exhaust, something sweet I couldn't identify. The airport was massive and modern, filled with Thai people and tourists from every country you could imagine. Dennis met me at arrivals with a huge grin. He'd been in Pattaya for a week already and looked like he'd dropped 10 years. We took a taxi south, about a 2-hour drive through countryside that looked nothing like Ohio. Rice fields, little houses on stilts, shrines with golden Buddhas that caught the sunlight. "Wait until you see Walking Street," Dennis said. "It's like nothing you've ever experienced." He wasn't wrong. We arrived in Pattaya around sunset. The city sprawled along the coast, high-rise condos, neon signs, massage parlors, bars, and restaurants crammed together in organized chaos. The streets were packed with motorcycles, tuk-tuks, and tourists from Russia, China, India, Europe, and America. Music blasted from every direction. Techno, rock, Thai pop songs I didn't understand. Dennis took me straight to Walking Street, a long pedestrian road that came alive after dark. It was overwhelming, hundreds of bars with girls in bikinis, dancing on elevated platforms, LED screens, flashing drink specials, tourists stumbling drunk between venues, and an energy that felt electric and dangerous and intoxicating all at once. "Pick a bar," Dennis said. "Any bar, trust me, you'll have fun." I chose one called Candy Bar because the name seemed harmless. We walked in, and within seconds, 3 girls approached us, smiling, grabbing our arms, leading us to a table. One of them, a petite girl with long black hair and a red bikini, sat next to me and introduced herself as Ning. "Where you from, handsome man?" she asked in broken English. "America. Cleveland." "Oh, America. Very good. You first time Pattaya?" "Yeah, first time," she giggled and touched my arm. "I take care of you. Make sure you have good time, okay?" I bought her a drink, 150 baht, about $4. Then another. Then one for her friend. Dennis was deep in conversation with 2 other girls, laughing like he'd known them for years. The music was loud, but Ning leaned in close so I could hear her, her perfume mixing with cigarette smoke and beer. She asked about my life, my job, why I came to Thailand. She listened like she actually cared, nodding and laughing at my stories about trucking. When I told her I was divorced, she touched my hand and said, "She's stupid. You good man. I can see." It was a line. I knew it was a line. But I hadn't had a woman look at me like that in years, like I mattered, like I was interesting, like I was worth her time. And for $4 a drink, I could buy that feeling all night. I spent $600 that first night between drinks, bar fines, and taking Ning back to my hotel. It was transactional, sure, but it didn't feel cold or shameful. It felt like a break from being invisible. The next morning, Ning left early. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You come see me again, okay? I wait for you." I told her I would, and I meant it. I extended my trip from 2 weeks to 3. Then I booked another trip for February, then April. By June 2017, I'd been to Pattaya 4 times, each visit lasting longer than the last. I told myself I was traveling, exploring Asia, enjoying my retirement. But the truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was addicted to how Pattaya made me feel. Back in Cleveland, I was nobody. A divorced retiree living in a sterile apartment, eating TV dinners, watching baseball games alone. My brother called once a month, out of obligation. My ex-wife had remarried. The guys from work had their own lives. But in Pattaya, I was Papa Hal. Girls waved when I walked down Soy Bukow. Bar owners knew my drink order. I had dinner invitations, late-night conversations, and a rotation of women who seemed genuinely happy to see me. It didn't matter that I was 61, balding, and 20 pounds overweight. In Pattaya, I had value. I stopped seeing Ning after the second trip. She'd started asking for money, her mother was sick, her rent was late, her motorcycle broke down. Classic stuff. I wasn't stupid. I gave her 2,000 baht once and never went back to her bar. But there were dozens of other girls. Some I saw multiple times. Others were one-night transactions. I learned the rhythm of the city, which bars had the prettiest girls, which ones watered down drinks, where to get good cheap food, how to negotiate bar fines, which motorcycle taxi drivers wouldn't rip you off. I rented a small studio apartment near Soy Honey for 8,000 baht a month, about $240. It made more sense than hotels, especially since I was spending 4 months a year there now. I furnished it with cheap IKEA knockoffs from Tucum and a flat-screen TV I bought at Big C. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My pension covered rent and food. The retirement savings covered everything else: bars, girls, nights out, weekends in Bangkok or Koh Chang. I was burning through about $3,000 a month, which seemed reasonable at the time. I had over $250,000 left. That could last years if I was careful. But I wasn't careful. I was happy. And happiness costs money in Pattaya. I started seeing a girl named Nong regularly in August. Everyone called her Cherry, and she worked at a small bar off Second Road. She was 24, from a village near Udon Thani, and she had this way of making you feel like you were the only customer in the bar, even when it was packed. Cherry wasn't like the others. She didn't hustle for drinks. She didn't constantly ask for money. She sat with me for hours, teaching me basic Thai phrases, showing me pictures of her family, telling me about her dreams of opening a small shop someday. "I no want work bar forever, Papa Hal," she'd say, using the nickname everyone called me now. "I want good life, normal life." I started giving her money without her asking. 5,000 baht here, 10,000 there. I told myself I was helping her, save for that shop. But really, I was buying insurance, making sure she'd be there the next time I came to town. By October, I was flying to Pattaya every 6 weeks. My brother asked what the hell I was doing spending so much time in Thailand. I told him I liked the weather. He said I was acting like a fool and wasting my money on prostitutes. We didn't talk for 3 months after that. In November, Cherry asked if I'd help pay for her younger brother's school fees. She showed me a handwritten invoice from a school in Udon Thani, 12,000 baht for the semester, about $360. She cried when she asked, saying she was ashamed but didn't know who else to turn to. I gave her the money. She hugged me and called me a good man. 2 weeks later, her motorcycle broke down. I gave her 20,000 baht for repairs. A month after that, her mother needed medicine. Another 15,000. I was spending more on Cherry than I'd spent on my ex-wife in a year, but I told myself it was different. Cherry needed me. She appreciated me. She wasn't asking for luxury, just help. And what good was money if you couldn't help someone you cared about? I never stopped to ask why a 24-year-old bar girl thought a 61-year-old foreign man was the answer to her problems. I never questioned why her crises always came right when my pension hit my account. I never wondered if she had other Papa Hals sending her money too. I just kept giving, because every time I did, she smiled at me like I was her hero, and I needed to be someone's hero. In January 2018, I made the decision that would destroy my life. I sold my apartment in Cleveland, closed my American bank account, and moved to Pattaya permanently. My brother called me insane. My financial advisor warned me I was making a catastrophic mistake. Even Dennis, who'd introduced me to Thailand, told me I was moving too fast. But I didn't care. I was 62 years old, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. No cold winters, no loneliness, no reminders of failure. Just sunshine, cheap beer, and a city that never judged me. I found a one-bedroom condo on the 14th floor of a building near central Pattaya. The rent was 18,000 baht a month, about $540. It had a pool, a gym I'd never use, and a balcony overlooking the city. I signed a 1-year lease and paid the deposit with cash. I bought a used Honda Click motorcycle for 35,000 baht so I didn't have to rely on taxis. I opened an account at Bangkok Bank and transferred $150,000 into it, keeping the rest in an American brokerage account I could access if needed. Cherry was thrilled when I told her I was moving permanently. She threw a small party at her bar, introducing me to all her friends, telling everyone I was her special farang. For one night, I felt like a celebrity. Now we can see each other all the time. she said, kissing my cheek. "You make me so happy, Papa Hal." I asked her to move in with me a week later. She said yes, but only if I gave her 20,000 baht a month for her family. I agreed immediately. What was $600 compared to having someone waiting for me when I came home? She quit the bar, or so she told me, and moved into my condo with 2 suitcases of clothes and a phone she never put down. At first, it felt like playing house. She'd cook simple Thai meals, fried rice, somtam, grilled chicken from the market. We'd watch Thai soap operas I didn't understand while she translated and laughed at my confused reactions. We'd ride my motorcycle to the beach at sunset. For 2 months, I believed I'd found something real. Not love, maybe, but companionship. A reason to wake up. Then the cracks started showing. Cherry stopped cooking. She spent hours on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't let me see. She went out with friends, always asking for money before she left. 1,000 baht for drinks. 2,000 for shopping. 5,000 because her friend had an emergency. I gave it to her every time. What else was I supposed to do? Fight with her? Lose her? In April, she told me her father was sick and needed to go to the hospital in Udon Thani. She showed me a picture of an old man lying in a bed, hooked to IVs. She cried real tears. "They need 50,000 baht for surgery, Papa Hal. I don't know what to do." I transferred the money that afternoon, about $1,500. A month later, her brother's school needed more fees, another 12,000 baht. Then her sister's wedding needed financial help, 30,000 baht. Then her cousin's baby was sick, 20,000 baht. I was hemorrhaging money, but I couldn't stop. Because every time I hesitated, Cherry would look at me with those big eyes and say, "You don't trust me? You think I lie?" And I'd crumble, because the alternative, admitting I was being used, was too painful to accept. By August, I'd spent over $60,000 in 8 months. My Bangkok bank account was nearly empty. I was living off my pension, which barely covered rent and food after I gave Cherry her monthly allowance. I should have kicked her out. I should have gone home. But I didn't, because going home meant admitting I'd thrown my life away for nothing. So I stayed. And the bleeding continued. In September 2018, Cherry disappeared for 3 days without explanation. She didn't answer her phone. Her friends at the bar said they hadn't seen her. I drove around Pattaya on my motorcycle, checking her old haunts, feeling pathetic and desperate. She came back on the 4th day like nothing had happened. She said she'd gone to visit her family, and her phone died. I asked why she didn't tell me. She shrugged and said I wasn't her father. I didn't need to know everything. We fought for the first time. I told her I'd given her everything and deserved basic respect. She laughed and said, "I gave her money because I wanted to, not because she forced me." Then she asked if I wanted her to leave. I said no, because I knew if she left, I'd be alone again. And loneliness was worse than being used. She stayed, but something shifted. She stopped pretending to care. She'd come home late, smelling like cigarettes and perfume, and go straight to bed without a word. She stopped cooking entirely. She stopped touching me. I knew she was seeing other men, maybe working at a different bar, maybe just collecting money from multiple sponsors like me. I didn't ask, because I didn't want to know the answer. In November, my brother called to tell me our mother had died. She'd been in a nursing home for years, slowly fading from dementia. I hadn't visited her since moving to Thailand. I told my brother I couldn't afford to fly back for the funeral. He called me a selfish bastard and hung up. I sat on my balcony that night, drinking Leo beer and watching the city lights blur through tears. I'd abandoned my family, burned through my savings, and tied my happiness to a 24-year-old bar girl who didn't even like me. And I couldn't leave because I had nowhere else to go. In December, Cherry told me she was pregnant. She showed me a positive pregnancy test and said, the baby was mine. I knew it probably wasn't. We barely slept together anymore. But she started talking about needing money for doctor visits, baby supplies, a bigger place to live. I gave her 40,000 baht over the next month for medical expenses. Then she disappeared again, this time for a week. When she came back, she wasn't pregnant anymore. She said she'd had a miscarriage and didn't want to talk about it. I knew it was a lie, but I was too broken to fight. I just handed her another 10,000 baht and asked if she was okay. By January 2019, I'd withdrawn most of my American savings to keep up with expenses. I was down to about $80,000. My pension wasn't enough to support both of us, especially with Cherry's endless needs. I started cutting corners. I stopped eating out. I stopped going to bars. I sold my motorcycle for 20,000 baht because I couldn't afford gas. I moved to a cheaper condo, 10,000 baht a month in a grungier part of town. Cherry complained constantly. The new place was too small, too hot, too far from her friends. Why was I being so cheap? Didn't I love her anymore? I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure I'd ever loved her. I'd loved the illusion she represented, that I mattered, that I was needed, that my life had purpose. But the illusion was gone now. All that remained was the debt. Cherry left me in March 2019. No fight, no dramatic exit. I came home one afternoon and her stuff was gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter written in broken English. Papa Hal, thank you for everything. You give me better life. I go home now. Don't be sad. You good man, Cherry. I sat on the floor and laughed until I cried. 3 years, over $100,000. And all I got was a grammar school goodbye note. I texted her, called her, messaged her online. She never responded. Her number eventually disconnected. I asked around at her old bar, but nobody knew where she'd gone. Or if they did, they weren't telling me. For 2 weeks, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie in that sweltering condo staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every moment, every conversation. Every time I handed her money I couldn't afford to lose. The rational part of my brain knew Cherry was just one girl. There were thousands like her in Pattaya. I could find someone new. But that wasn't the point. The point was I'd spent 3 years building a fantasy, and the fantasy had abandoned me with a post-it note. I should have gone home, but I couldn't afford the flight. And even if I could, what would I go home to? An estranged brother? An empty apartment? The pity of people who'd warned me this would happen? So I stayed. And I made it worse. I started going back to bars, burning through what little money I had left. I wasn't looking for connection anymore, just distraction. A few hours where I could pretend I wasn't broke and alone and 63 years old with no plan and no future. I met another girl. Her name was Ploy. She was 26, from Buriram, and she had a hustle I recognized immediately. But I didn't care. I gave her money anyway. Not because I believed her stories about sick relatives and broken motorbikes, but because giving money was the only way I knew how to interact with women anymore. Ploy lasted 6 weeks before she realized I was broke. She disappeared mid-conversation one night, said she was going to the bathroom and never came back. I sat at the bar for 2 hours waiting, buying drinks I couldn't afford, before I accepted she wasn't coming back. By July, my American savings were gone. My pension, $1,800 a month, was my only income. After rent and food, I had maybe $300 for everything else. But I couldn't stop going to bars. It was the only social interaction I had, the only place I felt like I existed. I started borrowing money, small amounts at first. 5,000 baht from an Australian expat I'd met at a bar, 10,000 from a British retiree who took pity on me. I promised I'd pay everyone back, but we both knew I wouldn't. I stopped paying rent. My landlord, a middle-aged Thai woman who'd always been kind, gave me 2 warnings before she changed the locks in September. I came home one day to find my belongings in garbage bags outside the door. I moved into a hostel on Swai Buakau, 200 baht a night, about $6. Shared bathroom. No air conditioning. Cockroaches. The size of my thumb. But it was a roof. I sold everything I owned. My laptop, my phone, my watch, my wedding ring from Linda that I'd kept for some stupid sentimental reason. I got pennies for all of it, but pennies were all I had. By October, I was sleeping on the street more often than not. The hostel was too expensive most nights. I'd find a quiet corner near a 7-Eleven or a temple and try to sleep before the police moved me along. Other expats started avoiding me. I'd become what everyone feared. They'd become the cautionary tale, the broken farang, the guy people pointed at and whispered, "Don't end up like him." I thought about suicide. Not seriously, I was too much of a coward. But casually, the way you think about sleep when you're exhausted. Just a way to make everything stop. I stopped bathing, stopped shaving. My clothes reeked of sweat and street dirt. My teeth hurt from neglect. I looked like a homeless junkie, which I guess I was, except my addiction wasn't drugs. It was the memory of feeling wanted. In November 2019, I collapsed outside a 7-Eleven on Swai Buakau. Dehydration, malnutrition, probably heat stroke. A volunteer from an expat crisis group called Pattaya Guardian Angels found me and took me to a clinic. The doctor was Thai, spoke perfect English, and looked at me with the kind of detached pity you'd give a dying stray dog. He hooked me to an IV, gave me antibiotics for an infection I didn't know I had, and asked if I had family he could call. I said no. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "You need to go home," he said. "Thailand is not a good place for you anymore." "I don't have a home. Everyone has a home. You just forgot where it is." The volunteer, a Scottish guy named Graham, who'd lived in Pattaya for 15 years, sat with me while I recovered. He didn't lecture me, didn't judge, just asked how I'd ended up here. I told him everything. Cleveland, Linda, Dennis, Cherry, the money, the lies, the slow, stupid descent into irrelevance. When I finished, Graham was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're not the first, mate, and you won't be the last. Pattaya doesn't destroy men. It just reveals what's already broken." He offered me a spot in a shared apartment his organization ran for stranded expats. $300 a month, split between 4 guys. Basic, but clean. A chance to stabilize and figure out my next move. I moved in 2 days later. My roommates were all versions of me divorced, broke, clinging to Thailand because they had nothing waiting for them at home. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? I applied for emergency assistance from the U.S. Embassy. They helped me get a temporary loan to cover basic expenses and started the process of repatriating me to the States. But the waiting list was long. Months, maybe a year. In the meantime, I survived on $900 a month from my pension after the embassy took their cut for the loan. It was enough for food and my share of rent. Nothing else. I stopped going to bars. Not because I'd learned my lesson, but because I literally couldn't afford it. I spent my days walking around Pattaya, watching tourists make the same mistakes I'd made, feeling like a ghost haunting my own stupid decisions. One night in December, I saw Cherry. She was walking down Beach Road with a Western guy in his 50s, looked German or Dutch. She was wearing a new dress, carrying shopping bags, laughing at something he said. She didn't see me. I was just another invisible broken farang on the street. I watched them disappear into a seafood restaurant, and I felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just emptiness. That's when I realized the truth. Cherry hadn't ruined my life. Ploy hadn't ruined my life. Pattaya hadn't ruined my life. I had. Every single choice was mine. Every girl I gave money to. Every bar I walked into. Every time I chose illusion over reality. Pattaya just provided the stage. I wrote the script myself. In February 2020, the embassy finally arranged my flight home. One way to Cleveland, departing Bangkok in March. I'd have to repay the U.S. government over time, but at least I'd be back on American soil. Graham from the Guardian Angels helped me sort out my remaining debts. Not much, since nobody lends money to a broke farang. He also connected me with a support group for repatriated expats dealing with similar situations. "You're going to feel ashamed when you get back," Graham said. "Everyone does. But shame only works if you let it stop you from moving forward. Don't let it." The flight back was worse than the flight over. I sat in economy between a screaming baby and a teenager watching movies without headphones. I had $48 in my pocket, no phone, and a future that looked like a black hole. My brother picked me up at Cleveland Hopkins Airport. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, shook his head, and popped the trunk for my single garbage bag of belongings. On the drive to his house, he finally spoke. "You look like hell, Hal." "I know. Mom died thinking you didn't care about her." "I know. You threw away $300,000 on prostitutes." "I know." He was quiet the rest of the drive. When we got to his house, he set me up in the basement guest room. "You can stay here until you figure things out," he said. "But you're getting a job. I don't care if you're 63. You're not sitting around feeling sorry for yourself." I started working at a hardware store in April. Minimum wage, part-time, stocking shelves, and helping customers. It was humiliating at first. I'd managed a fleet of trucks. Now I was explaining the difference between drywall screws and wood screws to DIY homeowners. But it gave me structure, a reason to wake up, and the paychecks, tiny as they were mine. Not Cherry's, not Ploy's, mine. I joined a support group for men who'd been financially exploited in relationships. Most of them had lost money to online scams or American women, but the psychology was the same: loneliness weaponized into profit. Talking about it helped, not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me I wasn't uniquely stupid. I was just human. And humans make catastrophic mistakes when they're desperate to feel valued. By December 2020, I'd saved enough to rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, 400 square feet, no dishwasher, heat that barely worked, but it was mine. No landlord banging on the door, no roommates, just me. I started volunteering with Graham's organization, remotely answering emails from guys in Thailand asking for help, sharing my story as a warning. Some listened, most didn't. They were where I'd been convinced they were different, that their situation was special, that their girl was real. I couldn't save them, but I could tell them the truth. And sometimes that was enough. It's been 4 years since I left Pattaya. I'm 67 now. I still work at the hardware store full-time now, with a small raise. I've paid back the embassy loan. I've rebuilt a sliver of savings, about $8,000. Not much, but it's something. I think about Thailand every day, not with longing, but with the dull ache of a scar that never quite healed. I think about Cherry and Ploy and all the nameless girls whose faces blur together now. I think about the man I was in that 7-Eleven with $48, and I'm grateful I'm not him anymore. But I'm also not the man I was before Thailand. That version of Hal, the truck fleet manager with $300,000 and a plan, is gone. I killed him one bar, fine at a time. People ask if I regret going to Thailand. The honest answer is, I don't know. I regret what I did there. I regret the money I wasted, the relationships I destroyed, the dignity I traded for temporary validation. But I don't regret learning the truth about myself, that I was hollow long before I ever stepped foot in Pattaya. Thailand didn't create my emptiness. It just showed me how desperate I was to fill it. I see men like me all the time now, at the hardware store, at the bar, online in forums about retiring abroad. They're planning their escape to Southeast Asia, convinced they'll be different, convinced they're too smart to fall for the same traps. I want to grab them by the shoulders and scream, "You're not special. You're not different. You're just lonely and stupid and about to make the worst mistake of your life." But I don't, because they wouldn't listen. I didn't listen when people warned me. Nobody ever does. The addiction isn't to the girls. It's not to the bars or the beaches or the cheap cost of living. The addiction is to feeling like you matter, and that addiction will cost you everything. I matter now not because someone tells me I do, but because I've rebuilt a life that doesn't require external validation. It's small. It's humble. It's nothing like the life I imagined at 60, but it's real. And that's more than I had in Pattaya. I still have nightmares sometimes. I'm back in Thailand, walking down Walking Street, and Cherry's there, smiling, calling my name. I reach into my pocket to give her money, but my wallet's empty. She laughs and walks away. And I'm alone in a city that doesn't recognize me anymore. I wake up in my studio apartment in Cleveland, heart pounding, and remind myself I'm home, that I survived, that I'm one of the lucky ones. Graham from Pattaya Guardian Angels still sends me updates. Another expat found dead in a cheap room. Another guy stranded with no money. Another man who thought he was different. I forward the messages to the support group I'm part of. We talk about them. We shake our heads. We tell ourselves we're glad we got out. But we all know the truth. We're just luckier versions of those men. We made the same mistakes. We told ourselves the same lies. We just happened to hit bottom before we died there. Last week, I got an email from a guy in Columbus planning to retire to Pattaya next year. He'd read one of my posts and wanted advice. He said he had $200,000 saved and a plan to make it last. He said he wasn't going for the girls. He just wanted adventure and cheap living. I wrote back, "The girls will find you anyway. And when they do, your plan won't matter. Because Pattaya doesn't care about your plan. It only cares that you're lonely enough to believe you're finally living." He never responded. I don't blame him. I wouldn't have listened either. I'm 67 now. I'll probably work until I'm 75. I'll never own a house. I'll never retire comfortably. I'll never get back what I lost. But I have my dignity. I have my clarity. And I have a story that might save someone if they're willing to hear it. Pattaya taught me a brutal lesson. You can't buy love. You can't buy purpose. And you can't buy your way out of loneliness. All you can do is face the man in the mirror and ask yourself why you're so desperate to run. I wish I'd asked myself that before I booked the first flight. But I didn't. And that's why I'm here, broke at 67, living in Cleveland, stocking shelves at a hardware store, and writing warnings that nobody will heed. If you're reading this and thinking about making the same mistake, let me save you some time. You're not different. You're not smarter. You're not immune. You're just lonely. And loneliness is the most expensive thing you'll ever try to cure. Trust me, I know. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about love scams, financial exploitation, and the psychology of desperation. These stories matter not because they're entertaining, but because they're real. And reality is the best teacher, even when the lesson is brutal. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, paradise is only paradise if you don't have to buy it.